case now closed on whether or not Donald Trump is a racist, and any doubts about whether he plans to run on the themes of racial animus and division erased. Democrats today signaling their intention to focus the nation's attention on Donald Trump's criminal conduct. As Democrats prepare for the arrival of special counsel Robert Mueller on Capitol Hill next week, their plan for his day of wall-to-wall testimony is becoming clearer. If Donald Trump were anyone but the president, he would be charged with the crimes Mueller uncovered. A Democratic staffer on the House Judiciary Committee tells NBC News, quote, "What's important is there is truly shocking evidence of criminal misconduct by the president, not once, but again and again and again, that would result in any other American being criminally charged in a multiple count indictment. Those multiple counts would include the following flashpoints in the obstruction of justice investigation, where Democrats are planning to focus most of their attention next week. 1, Donald Trump repeatedly directing his White House counsel, Don McGahn, to fire Robert Mueller. 2, telling McGahn to lie about being asked to fire Robert Mueller when the news media reported on it. 3, directing former campaign aide Corey Lewandowski to tell Attorney General Jeff Sessions to limit the investigation. 4, telling Lewandowski to inform Sessions that he would be fired if he didn't meet with Lewandowski. And 5, tampering with crucial witnesses like Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. Also potentially in hot water today, Hope Hicks. House Democrats ordering her back to Capitol Hill to clean up testimony she gave that's being described today as inconsistent. It's around her role and her knowledge of that illegal hush money scheme that helped send Michael Cohen to jail. Documents released yesterday show Hope writing Cohen in a text message about the press activity around an article about Donald Trump's catch and kill operation when it came to women. And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. With us at the table, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, former acting U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal, plus Associated Editor for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stottersbach, and the Rev Al Sharpton, host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC. He's also the president of the National Action Network. Let me start with you two on Mueller. It's hard to imagine a point in time, even in this presidency, when Democrats would have had to work to return the country's attention back to Mueller. It was such a focus for not just the media, not just the Democrats, but for Trump himself for the first 22 months of his presidency. Are they approaching this the right way? And do they have that right, bringing the public's attention to the criminal conduct unearthed by Mueller?
Well, I think that the good news for the president is we're not discussing right now, at least for the last few moments, whether the president's a racist. Now it's just,
right.
Are you
he
a
settled
felon?
That for us.
Are you a felon?
Yeah.
And I do think the Democrats are on the right path here, because the Mueller report, yes, it's 448 pages, and it's really long, and people don't want to read something that long. But this hearing on Wednesday is the first time that Americans are going to watch on television this guy, former Marine Mueller, former, establishment Republican figure. And his report, just in plain English, lays out all of these examples of the president, a sitting president, acting as a felon. And so I think absolutely it's going to be a devastating day for the president. I think the Democrats are right to finally focus on the rule of law. This isn't about politics. It shouldn't be about politics.
Right.
It should just be about what did the president do and what are we going to do about it.
I'm glad you raised that, because I have felt like the Democrats lost the frame around this. It was never about whether the politics supported impeachment. It was never about, well, he got away with this, so we shouldn't focus on it. It should have always been about taking that report, flipping to any page with your eyes closed, and focusing the nation's attention on how Donald Trump rolls.
Exactly. I don't care, if they read the report. I don't care if they thought they would all lose their seats in Congress. Their job is to do their duty and to say, this president committed crimes and the Justice Department's doing nothing about it. They're letting him go. They're giving him a get-out-of-jail-free card under this weird constitutional theory. So it's all up to us. And even if it hurts us in the polls, this is our job. And I hope that that's the conversation we'll start to see over the next week.
You're the rule of law guy. I spent more of my time on the political side. And from the political standpoint, I actually disagree that they would have lost. I think voters reward you for doing the right thing. And just from your perspective on the rule of law side of the ledger, is it clear to you that when Robert Mueller stood up before God and country, which actually means something, to Robert Mueller. We're so conditioned to someone who doesn't mean what they say or say what they mean.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Donald J. Trump, for one. When Robert Mueller says, if I could have found that the president didn't commit crimes, I would have said so. What the normal person can take from that is that Donald Trump did commit crimes.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was remarkable because the president, right after the Barr summary of the Mueller report came out, said the report found no obstruction, no collusion, totally exonerates the president. And Barr's summary suggested that was all right. But now that we actually have the report, it says the reverse. On just the first couple pages, Mueller says, look, if I could have cleared the president of obstruction of justice, I would have. That is devastating. The implication lies in the air, and that's what we should be talking about Wednesday.
Joyce, I have always felt like it was never going when you are elected after the country has heard you talk about grabbing women in the bleep, you aren't someone who can be knocked over by a single scandal. The country has baked in your deviance. The country has baked into the equation all of your shortcomings, and they kind of went with a mystery box and picked you anyway. But if you take on top of Donald Trump's role of orchestrating and greenlighting a racist chant, next week the country will hear from Robert Mueller. The country, I think 54% of Americans believe Trump obstructed justice. That includes a whole lot of human beings that are part of that so-called Trump base. And only 42% think he didn't. I guess most of his base could end up in that 42%. But you've got a majority, a clear majority, who believe he obstructed justice or attempted to obstruct justice. What do you think the implications will be of this hearing?
It's interesting because, as Neil points out, and Neil is always right. I mean, I feel obligated to say that sitting next to him. But the Democrats really let the Republicans get the jump on them on the political side of the equation when the Attorney General came out and gave the public misleading information at best about what the report said. So the question for the Democrats is, can they now, months down the road, re-engage the American public, get people to pay attention, and turn the tide about what they believe is contained in the report? This is the opportunity to let Robert Mueller read his conclusions in his own words, and I think that will be powerful. I don't think people will lose the point that this is someone who believes in the country, in the rule of law, and in public service.
Let me go through some of what they're going to focus on, because it's been a little while since we've spent a lot of time on this, but let's go through some of what Democrats plan to explore with Robert Mueller. First, just reminding people what the law is that he broke. This is a description of the law around obstruction, why it's a crime to obstruct any investigation. The attempt to remove the special counsel, that would be these efforts, these first two flashpoints where he tried to get his White House counsel to fire Mueller, would qualify as an obstructive act if it would naturally obstruct the investigation and any grand jury proceedings that might flow from the inquiry. A fact finder would need to consider whether the act had the potential to delay further action in the investigation, chill the actions of any replacement special counsel, or otherwise impede the investigation. We know from the footnotes of the Mueller report that this part of the probe was going on the longest. I mean, we have an interview with Don McGahn, who was a witness in this obstruction probe, I think a week before Mueller went into DOJ and said he was done.
I think that's right. And the obstruction charges, Mueller identifies 10 possible areas for obstruction. The Democrats have broken it out into 5 areas, but it's really 3. It's this effort that involves getting McGahn to fire Mueller, this effort that involves having Sessions unrecuse himself and prevent any investigation of the president, and then witness intimidation and pardon dangling. These have always been very clear just based on the evidence that's contained in the reports. And now Mueller has a chance to tell the country about it.
AB, I'm done asking on this program where the Republicans, we know where they are, right? They're Bruce Willis, they're dead, and I think even they know it at this point in the Sixth Sense. But what do you think the possibility is that Democrats regain some of their mojo around this sort of clear-cut evidence of criminality?
See, I respect the opinion here of the great counsel, but I am very concerned about the politics of this, and that is because the war that will be waged when the Republicans get maybe half the time or more than an hour of the time will be on the investigation of the investigation and Mueller bashing. the Attorney General, Bill Barr, has Mueller bashed with the best of them, said that he didn't think his legal analysis stood up. They had to apply the right law to his findings. He blamed him for not coming to a finding, basically, in essence, saying what Jonathan Turley has said, that he failed as special counsel. As we know, the special counsel wrote a letter, very, very, very unprecedented and unheard of, if you know Bob Mueller, to put something and memorialize something he knew would get leaked, questioning Barr's conclusion and his interpretation that he presented to the public in context, nature, and substance, which is a four-alarm fire. I really think he needs to be questioned in anticipation of the Republicans' attack on him about this process. Can he defend this process? Can he defend his team? What about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page? And on and on. As a taxpayer, I think we're owed that. I think that he needs to stand up and answer some very unquestionable questions about his longtime friend for 3 decades, Bill Barr, and what this process, how it played out, and whether or not he did misinterpret the findings of the Mueller report, and what concerns he has. Is he concerned that some of the remaining investigations might be quashed for political purposes by the current Attorney General? And if he thought so, would he and any of his colleagues who concluded that, would they speak out? He only wants to stay, as he said, in the four corners of the report. Because of the coming Republican attacks, he has to answer questions about this process. It can't just be the findings in the 448 pages.
Okay, I don't want to skim over any of that, so let's unpack it together. We know the answer to some of those questions. His discomfort with Barr's description of his own report was revealed in 2 letters that we know of that he wrote. So we already know the answer to some of AB's questions.
But Barr still has had the last word after that.
Barr's had the first, last,
many
and second
TV
word.
interviews.
I mean, Mueller's done nothing. Can you both suggest how some of AB's concerns get addressed strategically?
Well, I think one thing that's real important, as you're saying, is Barr, after Mueller turned in the report, Barr said, oh, I think actually Mueller could have reached a conclusion about whether the president obstructed justice. He was free to do so. So, boy, now Mueller is free to answer that question. He didn't think so when he wrote the report, but the circumstances have changed because of what Barr himself has said.
Well, am I missing? I mean, if Mueller had been forced to make a decision, he obviously would have found that the president committed crimes and recommended charging him, right?
Well,
I mean, if I'm Mueller, I would say, you want me to make a decision?
Exactly.
Fine.
Exactly.
You know, here you go. Recommended indictment.
Barr said that to CBS last month, and so now I think, Mueller is free to do something he couldn't do back in March when he turned in the report. And to me, that's why the hearing on Wednesday is an opportunity. Even if Mueller wanted to stay within the four corners of the report, Barr himself has invited him to go further now.
I want to unpack one more of your points because I don't think this gets enough attention. There is... I'm sort of a dabbler in Fox News editorial content, but there is a thread that has run through that network's programming in the mornings and in prime time for the better part of 2 years around Pete Strzok. I mean, they have so primed their viewers to think that this process was corrupt, and there is such there is zero likelihood that Robert Mueller's process was corrupt. And it would seem that all the investigations into the investigators have turned up nada. Why do you, is it simply going to come up again because that's what
this is what concerns me. So I don't know when the IG conclusions will next be released. So far, nothing's bad, the previous one, but there are now 2 current probes into the probe. What Barr has done.
But AB, let me just interrupt. If they'd found anything, you want to tell me Rudy, I leak for
no, right.
Giuliani
Nothing has been turned up. I
because
think
there isn't anything.
What Barr has done is shown us he layered a new investigation on top of the Hoover one because he intends for it to last into the next election. So you can always say this is under investigation. The only person on the planet that can speak about this is Bob Mueller, and he has to answer these questions. I want to get you on the record about Hope Hicks. It turns out she has some inconsistencies in her testimony, and I've watched enough Law and Order shows on TV to know that that's another fancy legal lawyered up word for lying. She lied about her role in the hush money scheme. Is she in trouble?
I think she has to be. When you see this text that she had sent Michael Cohen,
Let's read it.
who is in jail, by the way. I think that it really, inconsistency is a nice way of putting it. She outright misled the investigators. So she's going to have to deal with the text and the fact she said something that was absolutely the opposite of that. And they usually call that perjury in many places. I think that she has a problem there. I think they also have a problem with Michael Cohen that could be brought back from jail to clarify what the text meant to him, what led to the text, what followed the text. So Michael Cohen may end up still being very relevant to this process because they're going after Hicks.
So this is what Cohen texted Hope Hicks. So far, I see only 6 stories. This is the day after the Wall Street Journal reported on Donald Trump and Karen McDougal and the effort to catch and kill that story. This came out right before the election. I think this was 2 days before the election. So Cohen wrote to Hicks, who was Trump's media guru. So far, I see only 6 stories, getting little to no traction. Hicks wrote to Cohen, same, keep praying, it's working. We don't know what it's is, but usually...
And what working is, that's the problem. But the connotation from it's working 2 days before the election is that the intent of killing the story was to save him for the election.
Correct.
Which therefore brings you into campaign finance crime. And it means that the hush money was not just a guy didn't want his wife to know he was cheating, that it was about that election. That is where you go over the line into criminal behavior.
Now, Joyce, she maintains that she told Congress the truth. Democrats don't feel that she did. But to the Rev's point, if you're talking about it's working, you're referencing some sort of strategy is proving effective. And that strategy, as the Rev's saying, would seem to be tied 48 hours before people go to the polls to keeping something quiet before voting day.
You know, these weren't affairs that the president had had in the last 6 months. They were old. And if he was trying to just protect his family, to your point, and conceal them, it's hard to see that happening right on the eve of the election, right after the Access Hollywood tape comes out. So I think all of the evidence builds towards this being an effort to conceal as we walk into the campaign. What I think the interesting question here is, why did the SDNY close up shop and walk away without prosecuting Hope Hicks? And I suspect it's because of a quirk in this particular statute, the campaign finance crime, that says the government has to be able to prove that the defendant knew that what they were doing was criminal. Not, for instance, that they were violating this particular statute, but that it was a crime. So Hope Hicks, the novice to politics, the novice to campaigning, maybe gets off the hook on that ground. But that doesn't save her in Congress. If she's lied about discrete facts, she would be eligible for prosecution. Whether or not there'd be prosecution by a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, by this attorney general, is a different question.
So I count 2 now of people very close to Donald Trump Jr., and now Hope Hicks, who may get away with criminality because of their ignorance. Do I have that right, or am I missing someone?
I think that's right, that it's those 2. I mean, but, you know, I think the jury's still out as to why the prosecution wasn't made. Yes, I think Joyce could be right that it's because of what we call criminal intent mens rea, but it's also very plausible given what this attorney general has done in clearing the president in on obstruction in ways that make no sense whatsoever, in writing that ridiculous memo that he wrote last year, that this attorney general is acting tendentiously in protecting those who've protected the president.
Just because you 2 are 2 of the smartest people that have helped us understand what happened the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, I wonder what your advice is for Democratic lawmakers going into this last weekend that they have to prepare for the Mueller hearing.
The way that you ask a question is almost as important as the question itself. So these questions need to be sequenced in a way that will let Mueller tell the story in his own words of what his findings are. It's really easy if you're the president to say no collusion, no obstruction. It's a lot more difficult to explain what the misconduct was. And Democrats have to let Mueller walk through that in a way that's comprehensible without this choppy back and forth that we always see in hearings.
I'd say to the Democrats, you know, this isn't about you. Don't grandstand. Just get to the truth. Do the right thing. Every time in American history when people stand up for the rule of law to do the right thing, they get rewarded, to your point earlier. That's all they have to do. It's not about them. Don't go play for the cameras. Just get the facts. That's all the American people want.
And I guess I want to give you the last word here, Rev. I mean, politics are, you know, like the mercury inside a thermometer. They slip through your hands. If you grab onto them too hard, they slip through. What do you think the sort of, you know, what are the parameters of the possible politics of next week?
The politics is that you are looking at whether or not you can really establish with a public forum that Mueller could not clear the president. So with all of, and I agree with her that the Republicans are going to try to tear him the investigation apart. You can't say we accept that he said there was no collusion, but the same investigators and all were wrong to say they could not exonerate him. They've got to stay on that, and they have to keep the focus on Mueller and the report and not grandstand and try to win votes and Facebook likes. They've got to be very clear that we're here to get the truth, and you've given us this report where you've clearly said that I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt in our mind our investigation does not prove collusion, but we cannot say the same about obstruction. If he stays right there, they've raised the level that we need the public to see that this president is possibly guilty of obstruction. Otherwise, he could have cleared him of that. And the Republicans can't have it both ways unless they let them have it. You can't say we believe you on A, but you were incompetent and corrupt on B, and it's the same report.
It's a great point, AB. So the man who cleared Trump on obstruction and collusion is going to be the man they blast for being corrupt. It doesn't pass the common sense test.
No, it doesn't. But they don't care. What they're going to do is they're going to attack the process. So they're going to say that they agree with the findings. He was not charged with obstruction. There's the collusion didn't meet the threshold for evidence to make it legally conspiracy. But it was a sloppy process. The FBI is an infested hellhole, and so is the DOJ, and tell us about, you know, Peter Strzok. They are definitely going to torpedo the process. That's the way to change the subject from the questions the Democrats are going to ask, like if it was citizen Joe Smith, would he have been indicted? You know, the stuff that they have to taint the process. So they're going to kill the messenger a little because they're going to talk about the probe of the probe the whole time.
But the Democrats have to make it clear it was the same process. It was the same investigators. It was the same people. We didn't switch from A to B. It's the same process. And they have to stay right there and forget the sound bites, forget trying to be on the evening news. Just stay right on point.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.